Does Canada simply just want to see Israel fail, or are we just lurching from one failed foreign affairs minister to another who doesn't know what she's talking about? Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Warren Kinsella, Brian Lilley, and Lorrie Goldstein. I know it's harsh, Warren, but look, Canada had a failed foreign affairs minister in Melanie Joly under the Trudeau regime. Now we have Anita Anand under Mark Carney. But Anand goes to the United Nations, completely bashes Israel, completely overturns Canada's longstanding policy about standing with Israel. They recognize the Palestinian statehood. Anand goes and embarrasses the country in front of the United Nations, probably in front of about 20 people, because let's be honest, Warren, there weren't a lot of people there for Anand's speech. But nonetheless, it still matters where she takes direct aim at Israel. And I have to wonder, why is this liberal government so dead set on not seeing Israel succeed?
The Department of Foreign Affairs, or Global Affairs as it's now called, is this big building on Sussex Drive, kind of overlooking the Ottawa River. And that has been the location for decades for anti-Israel policy. And we've had lots of foreign affairs ministers over the years, and they've been smart enough under my former boss, Chrétien, and under Prime Minister Harper to resist that. We now have, under Melanie Joly and now Anita Anand, ministers who have become captives of a policy, and I say this deliberately, that is anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. You know, most of the time, nobody pays attention to what Canada says internationally anymore. Like diplomatically, militarily, we are insignificant. However, when we join with France and the UK and others to demonize Israel and to recognize the Palestinian state, what was the immediate result? The immediate result was Hamas celebrating, thanking us for what we did, and executing dissidents in the streets of Gaza City, and Netanyahu saying, and I'm no fan of Netanyahu, but saying understandably, well, the hell with it. What's the point of me doing any compromise? We're going to expand settlements in the West Bank. So it is this unbelievable situation where we don't matter, but on this one day, at this one moment, we did matter, and we made things, Canada made things demonstrably worse, not just for Israelis, but for Palestinians too.
And of course, and in the region in general, Brian, look, we have the United States who has a 20-point peace plan that almost all the Middle Eastern countries have signed on to, that Israel has signed on to. Canada, of course, nowhere to be found when it comes to this. We're not even at the table because I don't think that we're taken seriously on these matters. And yet, this Carney government keeps putting themselves out there on this bizarre precipice. And to what end? Is it for votes? Is it for looking at Canada's changing demographics? Like, why is this the policy position now of the Liberal government?
I think it's multifaceted. I think votes, that's a part of it. Have you seen the demographics in my writing, as Melanie Joly famously said? Yeah. Have you seen the demographics in Anita Anand's writing, perhaps? Overall, the changing demographics of Canada, but also politically, because demonizing Israel is now very popular with the left in this country. And I believe it was Warren that brought it up. I think you picked it up from David Frum a little while ago, Warren, that perhaps this is a sop to the left so that Mark Carney doing some other things like expanding natural resources, albeit too limited for me, that is so that they can keep the left flank while moving forward on some of their economic agenda. Maybe that's part of it. I think it's a lot of things. I think it's the demographics. I think it is the votes, the attempt to keep the left flank happy, Mark Carney's own personal philosophy. All of that comes together and brought us to this position. I found it laughable that as soon as Donald Trump announced the peace plan that's been signed onto by not only a bunch of states that immediately surround Israel, but also Muslim countries that are not overly friendly to Israel, like Pakistan, are backing this and calling for the peace deal. That Qatar is pushing Hamas to accept a peace deal. That Mark Carney immediately runs out and posts a statement to X and so does Keir Starmer and these other world leaders. You guys were just undermining these peace talks. I mean, when Canada, the UK, and others telegraphed that they were going to do this, announced that they would recognize a Palestinian state at the UN back in August, Donald Trump was in the middle of very intensive peace talks to try and get a ceasefire, and those immediately fell apart because Hamas walked away from the table. So they've been undermining this for the last 6 weeks, and now they want to run and join the parade. We look foolish. Just one last quick point to what Warren mentioned earlier about Fort Pearson, where the Foreign Affairs Department is having this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel element to it. When Stephen Harper was in and started shifting Canada's foreign policy towards Israel, Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien were a bit more neutral, but still very good. But Stephen Harper started to tilt it towards Israel. The Prime Minister's office was the one constantly sending out the news releases because the people in foreign affairs would refuse. And until Harper took control of that, they just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't make the statements that the government of Canada wanted. So the Prime Minister's office would send out news releases announcing foreign policy as a way to get around them. That's how bad it is in that department and has been for a long time.
Lorrie, I suppose picking up one Warren and Brian said, it's fashionable to be anti-Israel. It's the thing to do these days. We've seen the protests on our streets that have gone unchecked for over 2 years now. As we come up on the second anniversary of October 7th, we are arguably in a far worse position globally when it comes to all of the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiment around the world. But I want to pick up back on this notion of Canada and Anita Anand's comments at the UN, taking aim at Israel, calling what they're doing, saying it's illegal and being very anti-Israel in terms of her comments, which I suppose is fashionable to do at the United Nations because I think they have an entire department just directly aimed at taking issue with whatever Israel does, Lorrie. But our position on this, recognize the Palestinian statehood, no borders, no government, no real thought, rhyme or reason to it. What's happening with the Carney government on this issue?
Well, one of the things I think is that it encourages anti-Semitism in Canada. It's no accident that Jews are 1% of the population and 70% of the religious hate crimes are aimed at Jews, and that's all exploded since October 7th when Israel was attacked. I think this week the Israeli envoy to Canada said that relations with the Carney government are worse than with the Trudeau government. So and I do agree with Warren. Like seasoned politicians like Chrétien and Mulroney and Harper knew how to push back against global affairs, and I totally agree with Warren. They are notorious for being anti-Israel. When their representatives are on the CBC or something, it's like batten down the hatches, folks, because here we go. I also find it interesting in Canada and around the world that progressives are prepared to fight Israel down to the last Palestinian. Even the Palestinian Authority endorsed Trump's plan, which is the person that Carney, Mahmoud Abbas, and there's a lot of criticism about him, but that's the person that Carney says Canada is relying on to demilitarize Hamas and have democratic elections and all that. So you've got the Palestinian Authority, which rules in the West Bank, Hamas in Gaza, and their terrorists. You have all the major players, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, all behind this plan. Normal adversaries like Pakistan and India behind this plan. But because of A, Trump derangement syndrome, and B, hatred of Jews, and remember, a lot of these Arab Muslim countries, as I think was mentioned, they're no supporters of Israel or Trump, but even they say, look, this is a way out. This is the first step. And look, before anything happens, there has to be a ceasefire, and Hamas has to return the hostages. And yet, what's everybody doing, frankly, except Trump? They're going to the UN, which every year passes more resolutions against Israel than all other nations on earth combined, year after year after year, and they say, we support a Palestinian state. That's meaningless right now. First, you got to stop the bloodshed. First, you got to stop the suffering of the Palestinians. First, you have to, those families who were, lost their children, their babies, their husbands, wives, brothers in that terrorist attack, they have to be made whole. That's the first step. And Trump, at least, is trying to deal with that. Meanwhile, in Canada, let me give you an example of how bad it is. First of all, I've said that if I was, today's Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, I've said to people, if you've got young kids, I wouldn't go to a synagogue. There's been an attack in Manchester today, in England, 2 dead, many wounded at a synagogue. And one of my friends who watched his synagogue on Zoom, this is this is at the holiest time of the Jewish year, New Year's to Yom Kippur. They were advised at the start of the service that if there is an attack, the doors to the sanctuary will be closed, will be locked in, and will shelter in place. So don't try to run. Don't try to run.
Wow.
In this past week, there's been a heightened, like in my neighborhood, it's a largely Jewish community. And I know the police have been criticized, but God bless the police. They've got mobile command units set up in my neighborhood because a lot of the people are what I would call visibly Jewish. They're Orthodox. Somebody like me, I can walk down the street, nobody knows. But for a number of Orthodox Jews, they are potential targets because you can see them so easily. And so that's where we are. And so regardless of Canada's stance on Israel, to me, what the Liberals have done is that they have fed anti-Semitism. There's just no doubt about it.
Warren, last word to you on this. I mean, what Lorrie said is chilling. I mean, can you imagine this in Canada in 2025, where a segment of our population has to be protected by police, by security? It is so unfathomable. And look, it's easy to blame, we love to blame Trudeau and the Liberals, but they have not done, they've contributed to this. Their actions on the statehood recognition contribute to this. And, putting the personality aside, getting the deal, getting a peace deal with expanding the Abraham Accords, getting all that done is where we're headed. Trump has said to Hamas, you've got hours left, to get on this. And then Israel is going to do what they have to do with the full backing of the United States, come what may. So, but if the deal gets done, Warren, where does that leave Canada?
I think the bottom line, and all of us subscribe to this. We always tell people, voting counts, choices count, and so what governments are doing, or more particularly what they're not doing now, matters. Washington, D.C., Boulder, Colorado, Minneapolis, and now at Nashua, New Hampshire, and now Manchester. When governments are expressing indifference to the plight of a minority, the Jewish people, our Jewish brothers and sisters, this is what is going to happen. And it's happening now everywhere. And so the Carney government should hang its head in shame because it is contributing to that environment, that atmosphere of disinterest and indifference to the plight of a minority. And it needs to change because it's going to happen here.
Well, the Carney government needs to wake up to its anti-Israel position because the majority of Canadians do not support their stance. Well, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.